Okay, so we'll start today's session. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Saratoga High School PTSO Parent Ed. This is Maggie. I am the co-chair of Parent Ed. Together online with me is Sonali Jain, my partner and my boss. And we also have Saratoga High School Assistant Principal, Mr. Torrance. And also we have our welcomed speaker today, Mr. Dean Whellams. With that, I'll hand over to Mr. Torrance.
Well, thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Sonali and the PTSO, and for all the wonderful work that you guys do putting on the speaker series. It's very challenging during a virtual year, and we really appreciate that. Dean, we've invited Dean to join us as part of our Speak Up for Change week, and so I'm going to make 3 quick announcements before we jump to Dean. Number one is that we have our actually two announcements. Tomorrow night, as part of our Speak Up for Change week, we're going to release on our SHS. Can I just please ask the students to stop texting me? We will tomorrow night. We're going to have our 3 students and 3 teachers share their experiences about speaking up for change, or about reaching out and soliciting help and support. That video has already been produced, and we're going to release it on YouTube, on the SHS YouTube channel, whose link has been posted in Mr. Louie's newsletter. It's on our website. It's various places. But it won't be released until tomorrow night. That way you can kind of watch it. If you're going to watch the inauguration or your favorite Netflix show, you can watch it anytime. But it will be released tomorrow night. Thursday night, we've invited Dean to come back to speak to the students. And we're inviting all of our students to join us in a similar webinar as tonight. And that link has also been advertised on the website and throughout. Then the third thing is that we have over 20 clubs that are coordinating efforts and events, and mostly virtual this week, to try to reach out to a broader group of students to engage kids, hopefully and providing support for students. That information has also been on our publications and on our website. We do have a couple of clubs that are hosting service projects, and they'll be passing out stuff through a drive-through. All of our drive-throughs at the school, while we're in shelter in place, will be in front of the McAfee, and where you drive up and you drop something off. So with those 3 announcements out of the way, let's focus our attention on Dean. Dean Whellams, founder and principal of Team Elite Performance, is a sought-after leadership and performance coach and assembly speaker who regularly works with teams and individuals to increase self-awareness, develop corporate culture, and improve team performance. Dean has worked with Saratoga High School community in the past, 3 years ago, with our Breaking Down the Walls, and will be spending this week helping to support our Speak Up for Change initiative. Today, he's talking about encouraging kids to reach out, why and how. We are fortunate to have him and lead our parent community today in a discussion about how we as parents can better work with our kids as a team. Please join us in welcoming Dean. Dean, turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Maggie and Sonali and Ben, for kind of getting this all set up. And to all of you on the call here, I want to, I really want to just start by saying, acknowledging you for getting on and doing something like this. I mean, it's ironic, here we are asking for, ways to help and ways to get better. And then here you are already doing that by saying, hey, we're looking for other ways to get better and to learn and to grow. And I mean, it really is the famous Carol Dweck who wrote the book about mindset, and it's really that growth mindset. So I love seeing that. About 7 years ago, one of my best friends and I, we were having this conversation, and what came up, and what we realized, that both of us within a 1 year span, had moved. Now, I don't know about you, but moving for me is not real high on my list of super awesome things to do. And as most people can kind of agree. But what we realized is that we both moved, we're best friends with each other. And you know what? Neither one of us asked the other person for help. neither one of us asked the other person for help. And we got into this kind of discussion about why is that and what's that about and why do we struggle asking for help and why is that something that's not the easiest thing to do. So kind of my goal for you guys in the next 20 or so minutes is to a couple things, just talk about what are some of the things that teenagers specifically are kind of sometimes reaching out for help about, and give you some thoughts on those. And then probably the most important parts are talking about what are some of the things that inhibit and kind of slow us down from asking for help. And probably what you'll notice is in a lot of these things that we're going to talk about, they're really not just a teenage thing. They're a people thing. Because my guess is this is that because I've, whether I'm speaking most, I get to work with, high school students and maybe and then some college students. But even when I do work in the corporate arena or with adults, I mean, a lot of times I'll ask the question, hey, how many of you sometimes have a hard time asking for help? And it is always 95% of the hands will go up. And usually the 5% that aren't raising their hand, it's because they just don't like to raise their hand no matter what. So, but this asking for help, like it's not an easy thing to do. And like I said, it's not just a teenage thing, it's a people thing. So we want to talk about what are some of those things that hold us back. And then most importantly, give you kind of some tools, some strategies, some ideas to say, hey, here might be some other things that in terms of getting your teenagers to maybe ask for help and what that's about, and just some, like I said, some tools and techniques. So that's kind of our goal for today. I'm going to, in just a second, I'm going to do a quick share screen, and just because I can show you a PowerPoint. There's a few slides I want to show to you as we're running through this. I talked to Mr. Torrens about this, and these kind of things will be available to you. We're going to make a couple suggestions at the end of a video to go and watch, specifically go watch with your students, just as great things to talk about and kind of continue to open these lines of communication. So I'm going to do that quickly here. I'm going to share this screen and pull this up, and then we'll kind of go through these. And then most importantly too, look forward to doing some of the Q&A near the end, because I love, having a specific things that I want to share with you guys, but then most importantly too, to be able to answer some specific questions that you guys may have. So I'm going to share this quickly with you, and just a second here. It's interesting. You've probably heard of the Beatles song there. It's interesting though. I just recently Googled a list of like, what are songs where people are asking for help. Somebody put together a list of 92 songs, and they didn't include the Beatles song, which I thought, well, that seemed like a pretty big oversight to miss kind of a key one about asking for help. But what I want you really, really thinking about is, what are some of the things that, when it comes to asking for help, what are some of the things that you see teenagers these days, and kids these days, sometimes they are asking for help. I mean, when you think about what goes on a school campus and what they're dealing with on a daily basis, these are some of the really common ones. Everything from peer pressure to just school problems in general. Sometimes they're just worried in general, or there's issues with friends or relationship strains that are going on. Just stress management in general. I'll bet same thing. If I asked you, even with adults, I mean, how many of you felt a lot of stress, lately? I mean, a lot of hands would go up as well. So again, a lot of these things aren't even just teen things. And then there's the homework and there's the assignments. Sometimes it's not being treated really well on a campus. That shows up. Sometimes it's just like a lack of confidence or exam stress. So all of these different things that can cause stress can be things that, somebody might want to talk through. Somebody might want to reach out for help on. And so these are some of the issues that we commonly see. The question that I want to move to is, and this is an interesting one. I'll show you this quote. It says, "I ask for help, which is the hardest thing in the world." And it's an interesting, that's a powerful statement to say that asking for help is so hard. A lot of times when I talk to teenagers about creating relationships, I talk to them about what I call the 7 levels of relationships. But it'll certainly coincide with this quote here, because if you think about relationships, the 7 levels are, level number 1 is the greetings. I mean, when we first meet person, we kind of go through greetings. Hello, how are you? Those kind of things. Then we start to share facts. Where do we work? What do we do? Where do we go to school? Where do we live? Things like that. And then we get to opinions, right? Is the kind of what I call level 3, because it's definitely more to share about an opinion than just facts. And then you get to level 4, which is where we talk about things we want to accomplish, hopes, dreams, which is a deeper level of a relationship. Level 5 is what they call feelings, sharing how something actually makes us feel. That's definitely a different level than the other ones. Level 6 is when they get to fears, failures, and weaknesses. And then ironically, level 7 of all those is needs, which is asking for help, asking for assistance, which is why it's a challenging thing, because it requires a really, powerful relationship and strong relationship to feel comfortable, actually reaching out and asking for help. I want to mention too that it's important in what I'm going to share with you in a minute of some of the reasons that we hold back from asking for help is that it's really important to be able to diagnose, what holds us back from asking for help from the actual asking for help. Because a lot of people say, well, asking for help's the hard part. It's not really the asking for help. It's the thing that holds us back from it. And like, I'll give you an example. A lot of people say, well, public speaking is really, really hard. That's a big thing. And I'm like, well, it's not really the public speaking. It's the fear of messing up, or the fear of rejection, or the fear of embarrassment, or the fear of, that's what holds us back from speaking. Well, it's this kind of this same thing, because we want to, help young people to be able to really diagnose what is it that's really holding them back for asking for help. I mean, it's kind of this concept. I learned this from a good buddy of mine who's a counselor and a psychiatrist. And he said, when helping people, there's kind of two approaches. You can go down the river and then help get them out of the river, or you can go up the river and figure out why they ended up in the river in the first place, where then they're able to maybe kind of get themselves out of that thing. So we want to, teach them to be able to do just that, to be able to get themselves out and, and understand why, again, why asking for help is so important. So I'm going to jump down to this next one, and I'm going to put, and as I said before, these slides will be available to you later. If you want to take a little screenshot with your camera, that's great too, but they will be available. I know they're recording this as well. Here's things to think about when it comes to, why asking for help is number one, it's challenging. You think about in life with that idea that sometimes it's hard to identify, and really identify, do I need this help? Why do I need this help? And the other thing is that, self-reliance is a really, really important skill. And sometimes it's that struggle between, well, am I being too self-reliant? Do I need to ask for help right now? So it really is not an easy thing to do, as easy as it is to say it. The second thing I've got there is a lot of times it can be pretty uncomfortable. And kind of what I mean by uncomfortable is, you even hear sometimes people say, well, I need to swallow my pride. And, so it can be watching that and that uncomfort that can come from, from just reaching out and from ask for help. And additionally, that third one is that it's really is a skill set, meaning, knowing who to ask, when to ask, why to ask. Those kinds of things can be really critical, even down to the point of, and I'll mention this a little later. I use the term, do you need a coach right now, or do you need a cheerleader? Do you need the coach to give you some feedback, some ideas, or do you just need somebody just to listen to you so you can kind of talk through it? So there's those kind of things too. So it really is, it's a skill set. It's not just like, we'll just go ask for help. There's quite a bit more to it than that. The next slide I want to share with you is kind of thinking about this idea of what are some of the things that hold people back from doing it. So I've got 11 of them here I'm going to share with you. And the first one is, there is a lot of teenagers, when you ask them, and this is from my own research, this is from being in the world of teenagers. And sometimes, just ask them, hey, what are some of the reasons that hold you back from asking for help? And these are the things that I hear kind of over and over and over. And the first one there is that sometimes they feel like talking about it won't help. There's that mindset that if I say something or whatever, but just kind of talking is not going to actually make it any difference. Number two, this is a really, really common one. This idea that asking for help is a weakness, that asking for help is a sign of, I don't have it all together, that there's something wrong. And as opposed to seeing it as actually as a strength there. That third one, they're relying on others, prefer to do the things themselves. And it's kind of that balance between the two of knowing, like, when should I be relying on others, but when should I be reaching out for help? And it's a moving target, which ties back to that first one about why it can be challenging. That fourth one, sometimes they feel like there's nobody around to ask. Is anybody really going to listen? Is anybody going to take this in? Or, I'll ask teenagers, like, what's a common frustration? And they'll say, well, I sent a text to my best friend that I had really something big going on, and they responded with K. And so now they're not sure, like, who do I ask for help? What do I say? And it can be kind of scary for them, is what it really is. Then there's that fifth one. They're not sure who they can trust. It's fascinating. I'll ask teenagers, how many of you sometimes struggle with trust? And again, it's one of those kind of universal questions. I mean, a lot of teenagers' hands will go up. I mean, when I say a lot, I mean 90 to 95%. Most schools that I go to, that trust is a big deal for them. And when I ask them why, a lot of the answers I get are maybe they shared something and then somebody went and shared it with somebody else, or the trust got broken. So they're not really sure who they can trust sometimes. Or which kind of feeds to the next one. Maybe they felt like they tried asking for help and either didn't get it or it didn't go well. So they aren't really sure what to do with that. I met a young man years ago, and what he shared with me, he was talking about, he'd had a really tragic event in his life, and we were talking it through, and he said, well, I went to a counselor and it didn't work. And so we really talked about that. We talked about, okay, what does that mean that it didn't work? And, kind of he had this philosophy that, well, going and talking about somebody was just going to go away. Well, we as adults on this call know that there's things in life that just don't just go away over time. A good friend of mine who's also a counselor, when he explains, going through something tough and pain and things like that, he's got a really cool analogy. He says it's kind of like if you imagine there's a box, and inside the box is a little red button, and then also in the box is a red ball. And he said, if you imagine that ball bouncing, if the ball is almost as big as the size of the box and the ball's bouncing around there, it's going to hit that button over and over and over. And that button's kind of like the pain button. And then he says, over time, the ball gets a little bit smaller. So now as it bounces around, it hits the button less and less. But he said the ball never goes away, even when it gets little tiny like a bouncing ball. It's still every once in a while is going to hit that pain button. So this idea that like talking it through or going to a counselor or asking for help, that, especially when it's something they're struggling with, that it's just going to go away. It's kind of relearning that, no, that's a realistic, it's a realistic thing, that it's going to continue. That next one on there, that don't want to be a burden. Boy, I hear that one a lot. Like they don't want to bring anybody down. They don't want to bring their thing onto somebody else. And so again, they don't want to be a burden. It's almost like, we see so much on social media when everybody puts up the highlight reel and nobody wants to like ask when they're struggling with something there. Those last few in there, the idea about justifying their feelings or making excuses, they kind of get stuck in that sometimes and don't want to have to justify their feelings and just be able to say it. Then the second to last one, that idea that they've never done it before, similar there as well. Maybe they've never really done this before. And like I mentioned a couple slides ago, it really is a skill set to understand this idea about who and where and when. And, and a lot of teenagers will tell you, well, I've got my friends to talk through. And it's really good for them to start to realize that, yes, it's awesome to have friends to talk to. And yet sometimes an adult's perspective is everything. And, I'll often tell teenagers, it's not that we adults are any smarter. We just have a different perspective. We have a little different view of things. We've seen a few things. So that adult's perspective, and also another good one, sometimes that having somebody with a, kind of an unbiased or an unemotional connection to the thing can be somebody really good to reach out. And then that last one, there's sometimes they're embarrassed about the thing, whatever the thing is, or just reaching out makes them feel embarrassed or ashamed. So those are some of the really common reasons that you see them. And like I said, it's good to be able to diagnose this kind of stuff and figure out what the thing really is as to why they're not, sometimes people don't reach out for help. And my guess is this: if we were all sitting here and this was just an adult call and we were talking about reaching out for help, I'm guessing many of you on this call, you could find one of those that sometimes that's a reason you don't ask for help. Because again, like I said, this isn't just a teenager thing; it's an adult thing too. Sometimes we struggle asking for help as well. So after going through those, what I'd like to do is kind of transition into, kind of talk through some little kind of ideas to say, okay, so how do we kind of give them some other tools and give you some other tools to be thinking about when teenagers do ask for help. So I'm going to give you 7 of these. And here's the first one: accept that everybody needs help. And that includes us. So really kind of get into this place. It really is like shifting our mindset, because stop and think, if I had asked you guys the question, I said, hey, how do you feel about help? What are your thoughts about it? And it really is coming. And I love, I'm going to kind of take from the work of Brene Brown, because she uses this phrase a lot. It's not that we have to like love asking for help, not that we have to enjoy it, but we have to kind of understand that it's necessary. Because there's kind of like, if you put on one end of the spectrum, hate asking for help, love asking for help, it's kind of in this middle place of it's just necessary. You don't have to love it, but we really encourage people not to hate it. Just accept that there's going to be times when we all need help at some point. So just kind of just accepting that and realizing that can shift our mindset around it. And this is a big one in terms of like kind of reframing it, that because again, going back to that feeling like there's something wrong or that it's a weakness, and it really is reframing it to a point of saying, man, that takes a lot of courage. That takes so much courage to reach out and ask for help, and literally seeing it as a strength, literally seeing it as a demonstration of courage rather than a demonstration of weakness or can't get through this. So it is about helping them really reframe it and see it completely different, and see that that's what really takes courage, is to reach out and ask for help, as opposed to holding back and thinking that that's really the demonstration of strength. The third one I've got here for you is just, and I know you guys know this, but it's just a reminder. And it really is just that idea to really respond positively when somebody does ask for help. Make sure that there are no distractions. Make sure that you are clear. Make sure you're able to be, kind of be where your feet are. I like to use the term with a lot of the athletes, be present. And again, I know that we all know this, but it is a really good reminder. Or, and it's okay too to say, I can't give it my full and undivided attention right this second. Can we talk about it in, so there really is that time to just give it that one-on-one, completely uninterrupted attention, which is really, really important. And again, I know I'm telling you things that you guys know, but I just wanted to, remind you of those things. This is an interesting one too. I mean, I remember, many years ago, and I was talking to a buddy of mine, and had a very, very successful marriage, and we just happened to be talking, and we were trying to set up an appointment to do something. He's like, "Hey, I can't do it then because my wife and I are going to counseling." And I remember kind of talking, "Is everything okay? What's the matter?" And he said, "No, we like go every 3 or 4 months just to check in." And it was kind of an epiphany for me of like, oh, like that, going to a counselor asking for help doesn't mean something's wrong. It's just a way to kind of get better and learn and continue to grow. And so this idea of, like I said, of avoiding of seeing help as a sign of failure, but it just kind of, again, it's just kind of a normal part of life that is, and it's really, really healthy to be able to do that on a consistent basis. And I say consistent, I like to use the term, because what a lot of people do when it does come to asking for help, they tend to wait till the house is on fire, instead of like practicing on a regular basis on maybe some little things and some smaller things. I mean, it's the same idea as why do we go to a dentist, or why do we go to the doctor? We kind of get checkups every once in a while, as opposed to waiting until everything's wrong. So it's a good habit to kind of practice on a very regular basis. Just a few more here. This is a critical one too. A key one to think about is being careful of either of minimizing their feelings or trying to fix it, or giving them kind of the what I call kind of some of the cliche advice. So just be cautious of that one, because we want to. I'm a parent myself. Like, I want to fix something for them. But just be cautious of that, because we can sometimes, without even meaning to, with really, really good intention, we could potentially send the wrong message when maybe they're struggling with something, and we say, oh, yeah, but compared to, and trying to, get them to see it from another time. And sometimes they just kind of need to go through that process and share it, or vent it, or work there. So just be cautious of that one. It's just one to think about that sometimes we can do without even meaning to. So that's an important one as well. And then these last two is sometimes like reaching out to a professional is really, really helpful as well. Meaning, sometimes they might come, and as a parent, like, we want to have the answers, but we might not know exactly what to do. And so just knowing that sometimes that help can be a really, really important one. That might be something that they need to talk to somebody about. So, just always kind of have that one there as a potential tool as well. And the last one that I'll leave you with in terms of these ideas is this one. What I'd encourage you to do is never be afraid to kind of share a story about maybe a time where you struggled with asking for help. Maybe a time where, it took a lot of courage for you to reach out and share that with them, and give them some ideas there. It humanizes us. It creates a deeper connection there. And what happened, and tell the story about how you reached out and asked for help, and, and why it was scary for you. And, maybe even going back to that list of some of the reasons that holds us back for asking for help. Talk about what shows up for you sometimes when you're asking for help, and sometimes why it's a little bit challenging for you. And it's literally one of those things that by you going first and kind of opening that door and letting them know that that's not something that's super easy for you as well. Again, it humanizes that, creates that connection. And the cool thing is you're really leading by example. And rather than giving them advice, you're just kind of showing them, hey, here's something that I did. Here's other ways that I've used it. And here's ways that I've gotten better at it over the years. So that can be a really, really critical one, because a lot of times I'll get the questions, how do I kind of open the door about this kind of a conversation? Because it's not, sometimes it's not an easy one to do. And sometimes this, just like sharing something from your own perspective, from your own story, can be beneficial to them. So as I wrap this one up, I'm going to show you just 2 quick slides here at the end, and I kind of hit on these, but it really is this mindset. If I were to kind of say, hey, what's kind of an important takeaway from this? It's kind of starting with that foundational piece that asking for help is a sign of strength, and it's not a weakness. That it really is a sign of courage, and a sign of kind of stepping outside of our comfort zone, and which is really, really critical. But again, just to completely see it, so seeing it from a completely different paradigm. And the last one I'll share with you is, it's kind of just a similar slide, but it's saying the same thing. It talks about be strong enough to stand alone, smart enough to know when to need help, and then brave enough to actually ask for it. So like I said, hopefully those gave you some ideas some things to think about, some processes there. Like I said, we'll have all these there for you, and want to get to as we wrap this part up, we want to get to some question and answer. So I'm going to unshare this screen here. I think I can do that. There we go. Awesome. So hopefully that was about the right amount of time, Matt. I felt like I went longer than I was planned to, but I wanted to get that out there. So yeah, let's. Are there any particular questions that somebody fired in, or anything you can add?
We got one message from text message. I don't see any questions and answers, but the first question might spur some other questions.
Sure.
And the question is, when you talk about seeking professional help, what suggestions do you have if one parent agrees to it and one parent doesn't agree to the professional help for the student? They have a disagreement about whether to engage professional help or not for their child.
Yeah. I love a good question right out of the gate. I mean, if I was sitting there and talking to the two people, if I had two people in front of me that were asking this question, I think I'd probably start with at least engaging, where's that coming from? What's really the thing behind it? Is it one of those things on that list there that's maybe holding somebody back from wanting to do that kind of a thing? Is it holding somebody back on that, which, that's not an easy one to figure through. The second thing I'd be thinking about too is, if you've got people disagreeing on that topic, finding out, is there a compromise there? Meaning, I might be saying to myself, well, could we consider something like this and give it, kind of the let's go 3 times, or let's, looking for some kind of a compromise in there, because if you have somebody saying yes and somebody saying no, nobody's going to win in that one, because somebody's gonna have to give. Whereas you said, hey, what if we tried it a couple times and see what happens here? So, hopefully that gives them some kind of an idea in there. But if one of them certainly for it, at least saying let's try something here as a compromise.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think that's a great answer. That's a tough one too. Apologize.
No, I love it. I mean, good Lord, yeah. First, yeah, it was yeah. That's not an easy one, but like I said, if you got two different.
It's a big decision for a family to take on, and for many reasons, and I think it's important that both parents have those discussions before.
Well, and so much, I'll just say this too, around just because it came up, the professional help counselor, whatever you want to call it. So much of that too is finding the right person,
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many different philosophies on, going and talking to somebody and working through things, and I mean, different counseling philosophies and how they do it. And then what it really boils down to, because I've had this question before too, teenagers and I kind of the same idea, went to counselor and it didn't work. And then we'll start talking and I'll find out they just didn't connect with the person. For whatever reason, there just wasn't much of a connection there. So, so sometimes we'll say, well, maybe you need to try a different counselor, as opposed to saying, counseling didn't work. Well, it didn't work in that case, but maybe it's about finding the right person. Because I've been to a couple myself, and they're everybody's different in terms of personalities and way they do things and processes that they do things. And, I needed the person that was like, hey, put the mirror up and, called me on my own stuff. And there's lots of different, like I said, lots of different ways, but the relationship there is so important to have somebody that they feel like they can trust and kind of work through. I mean, if you've ever seen the famous movie Good Will Hunting, I mean, that's all that movie's about is developing a relationship with somebody, and to where that person actually trusted them, which we talked about that on the list, is that whole trust thing is so important, to students these days, and being able to build trust and build relationships.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dean. Maggie, do you see any other questions? I don't.
Yeah, Mr. Dean, I have a question. So
Yeah.
I think for kids to turn to parents, there need to be a kind of a great trust, especially for teens. And this trust, if that person is already a teen, it doesn't come like in one day. So the trust is preferably built when they were very young.
Yes.
So do you have any suggestions, like how parents should start building that trust and how they build that trust from a very young age?
Well, so let me make sure I heard the question right. So was part of it like kind of how to continue building trust now that they're a little bit older, or more when they're really little, or both?
Yeah, so I reckon that it's too late when you try to build a trust when the kid is already a teenager. So I reckon that we should do that starting very young. And we said, okay, when they were young, we took them to play games, we took walk, and then why didn't that trust was built over the years? What did we wrong, or what should we have done when they were small to make sure that trust is there when they are teenagers?
Well, I think I'll look at that from two perspectives. It's kind of like breaking down like what trust is, and one way to look at it is there's kind of like the trust that's based on something happening over and over and over again that's built up, and then there's more kind of the what I call vulnerability based trust, which so there's kind of the two components of that. And obviously when they're littler, it's some of that, it's that repeated action. I mean, it's them kind of realizing that we're always going to be there, that kind of thing. And then there's the what I call vulnerability based trust, which is almost like the suggestion that I gave of saying, okay, so sharing maybe something the time that you struggled with asking for help with them, and letting them in and kind of opening that door as well. So that's kind of another, avenue, I guess, or another angle to look at how to build and how to develop trust, with I'm going to say a young adult.
Dean, we have another question that kind of relates to this. Talking about establishing that trust, especially as they become teenagers. Oftentimes, as parents, we don't really change over those 10 years.
Right.
We're doing the same thing, and the kids are going through these changes. And as they get to be teenagers, we start to upset them as they share information with us. So the question is it okay for a parent to get upset? And their follow-up comment was, my child says he didn't tell us about a particular problem because we would get upset. So any suggestions you might have?
Yeah. I glanced and saw that question. I think it would be inhuman to be a parent and not ever get upset. I'm not sure that's actually possible to do that. So, and again, not knowing the whole scenario there, or what exactly happened there, I can give you kind of an example. I remember a young lady came and talked to me one time, and it hadn't even happened to her. It was her sister, and what had happened was her sister had gotten just essentially done something. The parents were upset, and so then the younger one, watching all this, decided I'm not going to ever share anything with them because they got upset over that. Like if I did something, or kind of well, just come and tell me about it type thing. And so she kind of like shut that thing down. So we talked a lot about that, kind of talked through that process. And because I was asking her, I said, well, what might be some things that would make that okay again? Because I kind of asked her, I said, because my guess is this: if mom and dad could go back and redo that, they would probably do it in a little bit different way. And she was like, yeah, no question that they would. And so I started asking her, I was like, okay, well, which parent might you start the conversation with? And in this case, it was her dad. And so they I kind of encouraged them to start that conversation more directly to that question that was asked. I would say a couple things. Again, not knowing the scenario, you talk about ways to build trust. Maggie, you were asking this. I mean, boy, one really, really big one that builds a lot of trust with teenagers is when you apologize to them. And because again, just getting to be with teenagers a lot, I'll ask the question if, mom or dad's ever done something that, upset them or whatever. And of course, then I'll ask, well, did they ever apologize? And I get a lot of answers that are more, well, they apologized, but it was really just an excuse. It was, I'm really, really sorry, but, which isn't really an apology. And so to answer that question specifically, so yes, I definitely think getting upset is it's a normal human reaction to get upset over something. And again, not knowing what happened or what the whole scenario was, but, sometimes really just owning our actions and saying, boy, if I had that one to do all over again, I certainly would have handled it this way, and kind of processing that through, but without making any kind of an excuse or a justification over it, because those things are going to happen. But again, that kind of goes back to that what I call vulnerability based trust, which is saying, hey, man, I blew it. I blew it on that one because I think it's important for us as adults to think when somebody comes to us and gets upset or whatever, and then they come and they really, they own it and they apologize for, man, I really blew it. I overreacted to that. That wasn't what I intended to do. And whoever asked that question, I do think that what's cool is, and they may not have looked at it this way, but I think it's what's cool is that I think it was, they said their son, or I don't know if it was a son or a daughter, but the fact that even that they came to him and said, hey, sometimes I have a hard time telling you stuff because you overreacted. I mean, that tells me there's also a lot of trust there too, that they even shared that with him. Because I've met a lot of kids who that even sharing that much, saying something like that would be scary, because then they might think they upset them. They might think it's going to upset the parent again. So I think it's cool that whoever that was, that their child came and shared that with them as to why they're having a hard time sharing information with them.
Dean, the questions now are starting to filter in a little bit. The
Cool.
next one is, how do we convince the kid that he needs professional help?
Yeah, keyword there being can convince them in there. I don't know that there's a specific answer to convincing them that they need professional help. I think it's probably some of those same steps of, can we come up with some kind of a compromise to try it? Because it also really boils down to the thing that it's hard to get somebody to open up that doesn't want to open up at all about anything. And I think too, what I'd be looking at was if somebody's saying, I don't want to go, I don't want to look at it, is can you look back to some of those reasons as to what's the reasoning behind it? Kind of like I was talking about, because it's really not going to the counselor. There's usually something behind it. Like, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I feel like there's something wrong with me. I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like I'm weak because I have to ask for help. I should be able to figure all this stuff out on my own. So I think as opposed to like starting the direction of convincing them there, it's kind of coming from the other angle of, well, can we figure out maybe what's going on in the first place? And then as kind of as a second part to that question, and this is going to be one of the books that I recommend. It's called Uncommon Advice for Parents with Teenagers. And one of the things that he talks about in the book is this idea that, up until children are about 12, 14 years old, we as a parent are kind of their manager. I mean, we're the boss. I mean, we set appointments and we take them places and we get them to the doctor's appointments and we take care of all that. And then, kind of unbeknownst to us as parents, at about the age of 12, 13, 14, depending on the kid, they fire us, and they don't tell us. They just fire us as the manager, the boss. And so, because this is when they're into that age now, they're making decisions and calls and things like that. And so it's that ability of a parent, and that's what he talks about. Can we shift from manager to consultant? From shifting from that manager to consultant, where now we're more talking through things and ideas as opposed to telling them exactly what to do. Now, he's very, very clear that in terms of health and safety, that's not really an issue. So I don't know the full breadth of where the question came from, if what the counseling's about or that kind of a thing. Because if it's a like a health or safety type of thing, then sometimes you got to make the call as a parent to start the counseling, whether they want to go or not. However, if it's more kind of working through some things that they're working on, sometimes it's taken more of a consultant role in that, kind of leading them to letting them make kind of their own decision on that can be beneficial. Well, but again, I don't know the exact, what the issue actually is, because that can play a big role in what the direction is.
So Dean, I've got two things to say. One, can you say the name of that book more slowly? And
yes.
Go ahead and say it.
Yeah, it is. It's Uncommon Advice for Parents with Teenagers. Uncommon
Advice for Parents and Teenagers. It's a book you would recommend.
Highly recommend. It's really, really well done.
You're not the author.
No, I am not the author. No. Not selling anything.
Second thing is, I'll just say that the guidance counselors at our school are excellent resources. If you think your child needs professional help and they're unwilling to go, maybe a chat with their guidance counselor would be a good middle person.
Yeah, and I'll take that one. Even I love that you brought that up, Matt, because I'll even a step further is sometimes it's just an adult on campus that could even be that bridge, that they trust. Because sometimes I'll ask students that too. They're like, well, I don't want to go to the counselor. I'm like, well, is there an adult on this campus that you trust? or that you feel like you could trust to at least, because an adult can, if they come to them and they're like, okay, this is kind of beyond my skill set, but they can help bridge them to just what you just said, to the guidance counselor, even if that was a tricky one. Because a lot of times I'll get that from a kid, like they don't want to go to the counselor, and then I'll say, well, what about just somebody on campus? And they're like, oh yeah, my PE teacher, I don't know, I feel like I can trust her.
Our counselors are excellent. We don't hear that very often.
Yeah, let's start there, or let's, to get somebody, because it goes back to that relationship thing. Who do they feel safe with? Who do they feel they can trust? I always stress with them too. I don't want to know about your friend like this. Yes, that's awesome. You have a friend to talk to, and that's super, super important. And, having an adult, and sometimes, like I said, it's good to have somebody with kind of a more, less emotional connection to it, or less, but somebody on your campus. So yeah, that could be that bridge to like you said, to a guidance counselor.
So we have two questions
Yeah.
that are very similar. I'm going to tell my boys to be quiet in the background. That have to do with young people, teenagers, children who don't talk a lot. And so what advice do you have? One question is particularly targeted towards sons who don't talk a lot and only respond with one word answers. And then there's another question: if a teen does not talk about their problems, how do we find their needs?
Yeah. So, I mean, here's a couple little things that can sometimes be beneficial. If it's you and the student or the young adult, like the one question was, I've got sons and they give one word answers. Here's a little, just a little suggestion that, I learned years ago from a friend of mine, is sometimes taking them for a walk. And because I mean, it literally can kind of free up the thoughts there. I'm not saying that that'll solve it, but sometimes that can help. And then I would also tie it back to that thing about, is there maybe it's another adult on campus that they do feel like they trust, they can talk to, and at least as a starting place there. Because, Matt, you guys have so many outstanding adults on your campus, to kind of start that process. And then the third thing to remember is that for a lot of young people, they literally don't have the words for this kind of stuff. I mean, I use the term, I just did a whole training just last week about, emotional intelligence and the idea of having an emotional vocabulary. Yes, most people like how they feel, and you get answers like, good, bad, fine, okay, so. And I'm like, well, that's not really an actual emotion. Like, what are you really feeling? And a lot of times they literally don't know. And so, to the parents that ask that, sometimes can figuring out some ways to kind of coach them or kind of help them with the words, as opposed to expecting them just to have the answers. Because sometimes they literally just don't have the words to even express or explain it. So, but again, the getting them to that kind of a bridge in the middle of somebody that maybe they could just go and chat with. And like I said, I've used I know it's an interesting thing, just taking them for a walk, but sometimes that'll just get people talking as kind of an idea. So hopefully that gives them a couple of ideas around that one.
Or I might add, play their video game.
Yeah, join them in their world. Yes.
And that might create a conversation. I'm going to leapfrog the next question, and we'll kind of end with that one. The other question is, what is a good way to respond to an issue without being reactionary, yet still not being permissive when a child makes a poor choice?
Say that question again.
How do you respond to what's a good way to respond to an issue without being reactionary, yet still not being permissive when a child makes a poor choice?
I would throw in here a couple of things. And this almost circles back to the parent that said, is it okay to get upset with my kids? So sometimes we as adults, we need a little timeout, breather, something to take in and process something before we say something that we don't want to say. So I would be thinking of that in the process. Again, I mean, that can depend on the I guess the level or the severity or the intenseness with which, with whatever's just been shared with us by our, or whatever we've just found out. So I'd be thinking about that one too. I mean, this idea of being able to manage our own emotions is really, really, really important. Number two, I would be thinking about the because their answer is, okay, essentially saying, so do I, how far do I, what do I let go? Do I permiss it? Whatever that is. And so kind of really thinking about the difference between shame and guilt. And I love, and I'll steal something from Brene Brown again, but she talks about, shame is, like I'm a bad person. Guilt is like I did a really bad thing. And so, and this goes back to kind of Maggie's question, how do we continue to build trust and that kind of thing? I mean, that's the moment where at the end of the day, they still got to know how much we love them and appreciate them and care for them and all those kind of things. And that what they did sucked, but it's not them. And so, and that is a tough thing to differentiate. I mean, even for us as adults, we go into these things of, we're really hard on ourselves, and we got to ask, okay, am I shaming myself, or am I just feeling maybe some guilt for making a dumb decision? Because feeling some guilt can actually be a good thing, right? That's when we feel the guilt, we don't want to feel that guilt again. So that can be helpful. When we feel shame, like I'm a bad person, that can be a pretty unhealthy place. So to your that's something I would be thinking about in the words and the choices, and when something like that got brought up, is that yes, this is about a behavior. It's definitely not about the person. And so being able to remind them that, you know, that you still love them, that you still trust them, that you still there for them. I mean, like we said, Maggie, it's another one of those options or opportunities to do it during a really, really tough time. When they've maybe made a tough choice or a not great decision.
So the next question then is, could you share a list of common feeling words that we test with our children? Can you share a list of common feeling words that we test with our children? I imagine this is about trying to find out how they're feeling. Words.
Yes. Okay, so what whoever asked that, what I will do is, yes, I have got two really cool tools for doing that. One of them they call it a feeling wheel, and because again, we just don't. I mean, if anybody ever saw the movie Inside Out, where it kind of gets into the 5 core emotions and then all those levels of them. So, and I mean, I love that question. It's like, because yes, getting them to be able to diagnose their own actual feelings is a really important thing. Because what I always tell people is that with feelings, we tend to misdiagnose, we overdiagnose, or we underdiagnose. What I mean by that is we misdiagnose, or we get the wrong feeling altogether. And anger is a really, really common one. So we get angry, and anger is often a secondary emotion. So if we could, like, whenever we get angry, if we could like go back like a nanosecond before we were angry, we usually find there's some other emotion there. We felt disrespected, we felt embarrassed, we felt dumb, we felt whatever, and then what we see is anger. So then somebody says, well, how are you feeling? You're like, well, I'm angry. And it's like, that's not really what it was. You were embarrassed, or your feelings got hurt, or so, but being able to clarify that. So we misdiagnose, we overdiagnose. What I mean by overdiagnose is you ask somebody, how was your day? And like, it was the worst day ever. And then you start asking questions, and what you find out was that it was really a bad 3 minutes, that they've been thinking about it all day, and now it was a miserable day. So we overdiagnose, or we underdiagnose, which is you ask them how they're doing, they're like, fine. Well, no, really, how are you doing? I'm fine. So we underdiagnose when there really is something serious going on. So yeah, to whoever asked that, however you're going to share this kind of stuff, I'll put 2 things in there. Like I said, one of them's a feeling wheel. It's a way to kind of process through emotions and figure out where it actually is. And it can help, even if you're the one holding the thing, you go, okay, you kind of hear. And then there's another one that's this really cool one. It talks about our level of energy versus our level of pleasantness. And it's kind of this little bar chart where you can be like, okay, I'm feeling pretty pleasant and I'm pretty energized. So, I'm kind of in this area. Or, man, I have no energy and I am fired up right now. And now, and here's some words that might describe that. I mean, most people, you ask them, like, give me every emotional word you can think of. And they literally, if they get to 10 or 15, it's pretty surprising when there's, I think there's like 3,000 words that describe human emotion. So yes, I will send both of those to you, Matt, and then you can post those, or however you're going to do that, to share, or I can add them to my slideshow, and they could be at the end there, whatever's easy.
Yeah, let's do 2 ways. Let's put it on your slideshow, if you don't mind adding that to the end. And then we could have the PTSO can share that maybe in their next newsletter.
Perfect. Yeah.
And then The question is, well, I'll go with the next question. With the current remote learning model, kids are isolated in their own world in front of a computer or in their own room. What can we as a community, school, parents, friends, to bring them out physically and mentally to feel connection with others? Now, I can maybe address maybe some things that the school is doing. If you want to talk a little bit about parents and friends, maybe.
Yeah, having mine are littler, mine are 10 and 7. I do know one thing about being on Zoom call, and I know the adults on here that have probably been on lots of Zoom calls. I didn't even know what Zoom was last March 12th. And so what I know is that we get, and even if they're engaging or like what we're doing right here, they're engaging, we still get done and we're tired. We just are. And so, I remember reading some stuff on this, and one of the big suggestions was it's almost like your body is telling you go lay down, and it's like that's the last thing that you really should do. I mean, you literally should get up and take a walk, or you should get up and go outside, or you should get up, but do some. I mean, good Lord, elementary schools got it figured out. They take those kids in and they teach them math for 45 minutes, and they send them outside to run and go crazy because they know that like it's that other side. So we're really no different in terms of that. In terms of that piece of it. The other thing that, and I know this is always a challenging one, especially with teenagers, college age students, is these little wonderful devices. Because that's what happens too. They get off the Zoom call and then they're just going to go veg out and get on their phone, and it just makes it worse. It just makes them more tired. It just makes them more. And so, because in their mind, they're like, well, this is kind of, you hear that term, I just want to do something mindless. Well, this is getting on one of these is not mindless because it's got your mind going a million miles a minute. You're looking at other things, tweets, Instagram posts. And so it's not a mindless, it's not a recharging activity oftentimes. I mean, it can be, but it's oftentimes not. So those are a couple quick ones. Matt, what do you tell them what's going on at the school? And I might think of some other ones while we're talking.
Sure. So at the school, we're going to be starting our after hours, which is every Tuesday at 4, where we have a couple of students host a virtual activity. And we've been doing that in the fall. We've stopped. We're going to resume after Speak Up for Change. So that's Tuesdays at 4. That's advertised in the principal's newsletter. We are, what else are we doing? Just drew a blank. We have the athletics and workouts are starting to come up. And then our clubs are doing a tremendous amount of activities. We have over 65 clubs. And if your student doesn't know how to, is not a member of a club, then all they need to do is go to the school website, go under student life, and then there's ASB, and then clubs. It's a little, you could search it if you forgot what I just said, but there's a list in there of all the clubs. That list has a contact email. Most of the clubs, to be an active club, has to have a meeting every couple of weeks, and they're doing some really great things. And we've got lots and lots of clubs. So those would be the things I would throw out.
Yeah, which are perfect because they're, like you said, it's any way that we can grab engagement and connection with other people is so critical.
Yeah. So the last question here, Dean, is how do we balance between having high expectations and not stressing our students out, our kids out?
I'll answer that one by thinking of this because it's almost, I mean, again, I'm kind of big on the putting on a spectrum there because if one end is like, high expectations and then, but over stressing them or, the lower expectations, it's almost like trying to find out where that line is to where we cross over it and figuring out what that, how do we not cross over that line there. And I guess too, from a parent's perspective, going back to that phrase that I gave you about the same thing about the behavior versus the person. I think that is such a key thing because as parents, we want them to achieve. But it's also that idea of stepping into that role of the manager versus the consultant. And so finding out where that, offering the suggestions, what are the ideas there, and that realizing too that some of these are their own decisions. So how do we challenge them and push them, and yet not push them away?
I think that's excellent advice, Dean. Well, thank
I
you.
was gonna share one other, just because I had another thought here, and this is on the earlier. This is the question about one person wants to take them to the counselor and one person doesn't. This
Yeah.
one's been processed. And I had one other thought, and I could be wrong in this. I don't know who asked that question. My gut feeling tells me it was the person that wants to go, was the person that sent that question in. But I just, as I was processing that through, I was like, here's a really, it's kind of a tangible thing to do. It's probably sitting with the other partner, spouse, and talking about okay, what's the worst thing, best thing? Meaning, if we go, worst thing that could happen, best thing that could happen. And if we don't go, what's the worst thing, what's the best thing that could happen? Because in my mind, if I'm making that decision, the things that are on the worst things that could happen if we don't go significantly outweigh anything that might happen if we do go. So I'd be, it's just kind of a pros and cons list, I guess we'll call it, but really kind of processing that through in terms of, what's the risk, what's the reward of doing something like that. So that might, I don't know if they're still listening, but that would be another idea of really kind of a break it down into the way, the old pros and cons list that we used to make.
Well, thank you, Dean. And we look forward to hearing from have you talk to the students on Thursday night at our posted webinar link it's on the website. It's in Mr. Louis' letter. And it's been sent through email. So we look forward to seeing you on Thursday night with the students. Parents, please encourage your young people to come and join us on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Maggie, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the parents. We have a great attendance today. And thank you for your wonderful questions. We are really in a very challenging times, especially all the online education. But if there is one point that you picked up from this speech, that is time worth spent, because we cannot solve all the questions, solve all our challenges in one session. So congratulations if you picked up something. We take a small step every time. And thank you, Mr. Dean, for your wonderful talk. And if you have good suggestions for our parent ed next sessions, you're welcome to submit them, and we'll just try our best to take care of them. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And after this, we're going to post the speech link on PTSO website. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you to all the awesome questions, and I can't see your faces, but all the parents that were on here for this thing, I just want to acknowledge you, because just you getting onto a call like this says a lot about you as a parent. It says a ton about you as a person, that you're saying, hey, I want to help. I want to do whatever I can. I want to learn. I want to gain new skills, like Maggie was talking about. Even if I pick up one thing that I'm like, hey, that's a little idea I hadn't thought of, or maybe it's just a good reminder. So again, all of you that jumped on and asked questions, I just really, really acknowledge you as human beings and as people. It says a lot about you.
And a parent said, this session is very therapeutic. Thank you.
Good stuff. Awesome. Well, thank you guys, Matt. I will see you on Thursday, sir. Maggie, it was awesome to see you. Sonali, awesome to know that you were there. How's that? And Ben, thanks for your help.
This was amazing, Dean. Thank you.
You are welcome. Yeah. Like I said, I got some information to get to you, Matt, and then I'll talk to you Thursday.
Yeah, I'm disappointed you didn't bring up the Raiders at all.